The classroom fell completely silent. No one moved, not even the kids who always whispered during lessons. Mrs. Harrow, the fifth-grade teacher at Jefferson Elementary, stood frozen near the whiteboard. Her mouth hung slightly open, her red marker hovering in the air, forgotten. Every pair of eyes turned toward the classroom door. There, filling the frame, was a tall black man in a crisp navy blue suit. The golden pin on his lapel sparkled under the fluorescent lights. His walk was calm, but there was something in his eyes, like steel behind glass. The classroom door closed gently behind him with a click. He looked directly at Mrs. Harrow. "I'm here to speak with you about what happened today. I believe you owe my son an apology." Whispers spread across the room like wildfire. Several kids leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide. Mrs. Harrow blinked, then stumbled over her words. I didn't realize he was telling the truth. I didn't mean to offend. You laughed at my son," the man said, his voice calm but sharp, in front of the whole class. "You called him a liar when he said his father worked at the Pentagon." He took a step closer. "My name is Colonel Jonathan Wells. And yes, I do work at the Pentagon." Gasps filled the room. A girl in the front whispered, "Oh my gosh." Then he reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a badge. It gleamed under the light, and even the back row could see the official seal. One kid dropped his pencil, but just before anyone could say anything else, the loudspeaker buzzed to life. "Mrs. Harrow, please report to the principal's office immediately." The room was still. Mrs. Harrow turned pale. She looked at Colonel Wells. He said nothing, just held her gaze. The class watched her walk to the door, open it, and disappear down the hallway. But as the door shut behind her, something even stranger happened. Colonel Wells didn't follow her. Instead, he walked to the back of the classroom and sat down in the empty seat next to his son. And then he smiled. The students didn't know whether to clap, scream, or sit in stunned silence. But before they could decide, a knock came at the window. Someone else was here. And that's where the Rayall story begins. Darius Wells was used to being ignored. He didn't really mind it anymore. Being one of only 2 black kids in his whole grade meant he'd learned early on to blend into the background. It was easier that way. Most days, he sat at his desk, did his work, and waited for the bell to ring. He didn't raise his hand too much, didn't laugh too loudly, and definitely didn't talk about his home life. Not because he was ashamed, but because no one ever believed him. When he told kids he lived in a house with a big gate and security cameras, they rolled their eyes. When he said he had dinner with generals and politicians sometimes, they laughed. But the worst of all happened one cold Monday morning. It was during social studies, right after they'd finished talking about how the U.S. government works. Mrs. Harrow, who always acted nicer to the white kids, stood at the front and asked a question. "Does anyone know someone who works in the federal government?" Hands went up. Kids talked about their moms working at the post office or their uncles in the army. Darius raised his hand slowly. Mrs. Harrow squinted at him. "Yes, Darius. My dad works at the Pentagon." The room got quiet. Mrs. Harrow blinked. "Excuse me. My dad works at the Pentagon," Darius repeated, this time with less confidence. She let out a loud laugh. A real laugh, not the polite kind. "Sweetie, that's not how we do make-believe stories in here," she said, waving her hand like she was shooing a fly. Some of the kids started giggling. "But he does." "Oh, I'm sure he does," she said with a fake smile. "And I suppose your mom is the President of the United States?" More laughter. Darius shrank into his seat. His chest burned. His eyes felt hot. He didn't cry, though. Not in front of them. After class, one of the boys, Tyler, shoved him in the hallway. "Hey, tell your dad I need a ride in Air Force One." Darius walked past him, jaw clenched. When he got home, his mom saw the look on his face and sat him down. "What happened?" she asked gently. He told her everything. His mom didn't say much, just picked up the phone and called his dad. The next morning, Darius didn't expect anything different. He walked into class and kept his head low. But then, the classroom door opened, and everything changed. The moment his dad walked in, wearing his full Pentagon badge and calm expression, everything flipped. But what no one saw coming was what happened after his dad sat down. Because just as things started to feel like maybe they were getting better, that knock came at the window. A man in a black suit stood outside, staring straight at Colonel Wells. Darius saw his father's smile fade. The room turned ice cold. And that's when the window slowly opened. A hand reached in and dropped something on the windowsill. It was a small envelope with one word on it. Darius. And just like that, everything got worse. Darius stared at the envelope like it was a snake. He didn't move. He didn't blink. The whole class sat frozen too, all of them waiting to see what he'd do. Even the boy who always tapped his pencil on the desk was silent. The envelope was plain white, not fancy or colorful like birthday cards. The name written on it was in thick black ink, in all capital letters, Darius. No last name, no address, just his first name, like whoever sent it knew exactly where it needed to go. His father stood up slowly, eyes never leaving the man at the window. The man didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He just gave a slow, tight nod and walked away without a word. Colonel Wells picked up the envelope with 2 fingers like it might explode. He looked it over, then turned it around. There was no return address, just a strange symbol on the back, stamped in silver. It looked like a bird with its wings folded and a key in its beak. He slid the envelope into his jacket without opening it. Darius, he said quietly, come with me. Darius grabbed his backpack and followed his dad out of the classroom, past all the kids staring at him like he was part of a movie. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody said a word. They walked through the hallway, past the lockers and the colorful art projects hanging on the wall, until they reached the exit door. Outside, a black SUV was parked at the curb, engine humming. When they climbed in, the driver nodded at Colonel Wells. Colonel, he said, we weren't expecting that letter to arrive so soon. I wasn't either, his dad replied. What's going on? I was told to bring you both to the site immediately. Darius sat quietly in the back seat, hands on his knees. He finally asked, what's in the letter? His dad looked back at him. I don't know yet. But if it's what I think it is, you're about to learn a lot more about me than I ever planned to tell you. Darius swallowed hard. The car pulled onto the main road and disappeared into the traffic, heading straight for something Darius couldn't even imagine yet. 3 days earlier, everything had felt normal. Or at least, what counted as normal for Darius. He woke up, brushed his teeth, packed his school bag, and came downstairs to find his mom flipping pancakes while the morning news played on TV. Did you study for your history quiz? She asked, handing him a plate. Yeah, he said with his mouth full. I think so. You think so? She raised an eyebrow. Okay, I definitely did, he grinned. His dad walked in a minute later, already dressed in his usual suit, adjusting the buttons on his sleeves. Big meeting today, his mom asked. Always, his dad said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. But nothing I can't handle. Darius had always thought his dad just worked in some office building in D.C. His mom told him once it was related to national defense, but they never talked about it much. He never imagined Pentagon-level stuff. That morning, he left for school like it was any other day. But during recess, things started to shift. Tyler, the loudest kid in class, came over with 2 other boys. They always moved in a pack, like wolves, and Darius knew it meant trouble. Hey, Darius, Tyler said with that crooked smile. Heard your dad works for the government. Yes, so? So what does he do? Clean toilets at the White House. His friends burst out laughing. Darius felt his cheeks burn, but he didn't say anything. I bet he's the janitor at the Pentagon, Tyler added, louder this time. He's not a janitor, Darius snapped. He's in national security. Tyler laughed harder. Security? So he's like a mall cop. The laughter grew, echoing across the playground. Darius turned away and walked toward the edge of the blacktop, sitting on the curb. He clenched his fists, trying not to cry. But what really stung wasn't the laughter. It was knowing they wouldn't be laughing if his dad wasn't black. He'd seen it too many times. Other kids bragged about their parents' jobs, and no one questioned them. But when he did, it became a joke. That's why he didn't want to speak up in class the next day. But he did. And Mrs. Harrow's laughter hit him harder than Tyler ever could. Now, sitting in the back of that black SUV, Darius kept thinking about that envelope. About the man in the suit. About the strange symbol. He looked at his dad. Why didn't you ever tell me what you really do? His dad sighed. Because I wanted to protect you. There are things in my job that are better kept quiet. Like what? But before he could answer, the driver turned off the main road and onto a long, winding driveway lined with trees. At the end stood a tall building with tinted windows and a metal gate. It didn't look like any office Darius had ever seen. Soldiers stood at the entrance. Real ones, with uniforms and rifles. The gate opened without anyone saying a word. The car pulled inside and came to a stop. Colonel Wells opened his door and stepped out. Stay close to me, he told Darius. As they walked inside, a woman in a navy blazer met them in the hallway. She looked serious. "We need to get him scanned," she said quickly. If the letter reached him, the signal might have been tagged. Darius blinked. Tagged. But no one answered him. They brought him into a room filled with glowing screens and machines that looked like they belonged on a spaceship. He stood still while a scanner passed over his body. "No trace," the woman finally said. "He's clean." Colonel Wells let out a breath. "Good. Sir," she said, lowering her voice. "The file says this wasn't supposed to activate for another 5 years. He's just a kid." "I know," he replied. "But we don't have a choice now." Darius finally exploded. "Someone tell me what's going on." His father knelt beside him. "I wanted you to have a normal life, son. I wanted you to play basketball, ride your bike, worry about tests and math homework. But now things are changing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope again. And this time, he opened it. Inside was a single black card with gold edges. It had one sentence written in bold silver letters. "They found him." Colonel Wells froze. The woman beside him gasped. Then alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Darius's heart pounded. "What's happening?" His father grabbed his hand. "We have to move. Now." Soldiers flooded into the hallway. Orders were shouted. But just as they rounded the corner to the secure elevator, an explosion shook the building. The hallway filled with smoke. Screams echoed, and Darius saw a shadow move through the smoke, tall, fast, and coming straight for them. Something, or someone, was already inside. The lights flickered as another explosion rocked the floor beneath them. Darius stumbled, but his dad caught him, pulling him tight to his side. "Keep your head down and don't let go of me," Colonel Wells said firmly, his voice like stone even as the walls around them trembled. Behind them, armed guards rushed past, their boots thudding against the tile. Red lights pulsed from overhead, and a loud whoop-whoop echoed through the halls like a warning from the building itself. Smoke curled around the edges of the hallway as a fire suppression system kicked in, spraying a cool mist from the ceiling. The elevator was a dead option now. The explosion had knocked out the power to the upper floors. Colonel Wells turned sharply, dragging Darius into a side door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." Inside was a narrow metal staircase spiraling downward into darkness. "Down," he ordered. But Darius started, only for his father to snap. "Go." With no time to think, Darius sprinted down the stairs, his feet echoing in the steel shaft. The deeper they went, the colder it got. A strange hum vibrated through the walls, like they were nearing something powerful. Colonel Wells reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black keycard. At the bottom of the stairs, he slid it through a hidden panel in the wall. The steel door in front of them hissed open. On the other side was a chamber unlike anything Darius had ever seen. It was huge, like a hangar hidden underground. Computer screens lined the walls. A long table in the center glowed with a digital map. People in headsets moved like they were preparing for a war. The air buzzed with tension. Colonel Wells walked in, and suddenly, everyone stopped what they were doing. "Sir," a young man barked. "We didn't know you were coming in." "I didn't either," Colonel Wells said, motioning to Darius. But the envelope came early. Gasps followed. People looked at Darius like he was carrying a bomb. "What envelope?" Darius asked again, this time more firmly. His father turned to him, placed both hands on his shoulders, and lowered his voice. That envelope was a signal. A warning. For people like me, it means something ancient and dangerous has been reactivated. "People like you?" Colonel Wells hesitated. Then he said something Darius didn't expect. "People like you." Darius blinked. "What?" "There's something inside you, Darius. Something they've been watching for a long time." The room went still again. Even the screens seemed to quiet. Darius looked around. "Who's they?" Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors slammed shut behind them with a clang, and a voice boomed through the room. "Colonel Wells. Unauthorized breach at sublevel 3. Intruder approaching your location." Everyone moved at once. Alarms lit up again. Security teams formed lines at the entrances. Colonel Wells turned back to Darius. "Listen to me. No matter what happens next, stay with me. Don't run. Don't hide." Darius nodded, his throat tight. The lights dimmed, and a new alert flashed on every screen. Identity match detected. Code black initiated. Subject, Darius Wells. The room sucked in a breath. "Colonel," a woman at the control panel said nervously, "the file on your son, it's not supposed to exist." How is this possible? Colonel Wells just stared at the screen. I don't know. Then came the sound. Not an explosion. Not a shout. Something worse. Laughter. It echoed through the speakers. Twisted. Cold. Human, but not quite. A man's voice followed. Smooth. Too smooth. You kept him hidden all this time. But now he knows. And it's too late to undo what's been awakened. Colonel Wells stood in front of Darius, shielding him. You're not getting near him. Oh, I'm not coming for him, the voice replied. He's coming to me. Suddenly, every light went out. Complete darkness. And then, the ceiling cracked open. A shadow dropped into the room, landing with a soft thud. It rose to its feet, tall and cloaked in black, eyes glowing red like embers. Soldiers raised their weapons. Hold fire, Colonel Wells snapped. Don't shoot unless I say so. The shadow stepped forward, its voice calm. Darius, you don't know me yet, but I know you. Darius felt the air grow thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. The figure extended a hand. They've lied to you your whole life. Ask your father about Project Echelon. Ask him why you dream about places you've never been. Why you feel things before they happen. I don't, Darius whispered. But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. He had felt things. Hunches that came true. Dreams that played out like real life weeks later. Things no one could explain. The figure smiled. It's time you learn what you really are. Colonel Wells raised his hand. Not another word. This conversation ends now. But the figure didn't listen. It reached into its cloak and threw something on the ground. A black orb that cracked open with a flash of light. Everyone shielded their eyes. When the light faded, the figure was gone. And in its place was a photograph. Old, torn, burned at the edges. Colonel Wells picked it up. His face drained of color. He turned it over. On the back, in the same silver ink from the envelope, were 3 words. He is ready. Darius stepped closer. What does it mean? His dad didn't answer. Instead, he walked to a control panel, typed in a long string of numbers, and opened a secure case on the wall. Inside was a metal object the size of a flashlight, sleek, silver, and humming with energy. Colonel Wells handed it to Darius. When the time comes, he said quietly, this will keep you alive. Darius stared at it. What does it do? His father looked at him. And for the first time in Darius's life, he looked scared. Before he could speak, another siren went off. But this time, it wasn't coming from inside the building. It was coming from above. Outside, the surface had been breached. And someone, or something, was coming in. Not to destroy, but to take. And they were coming for Darius. The sirens wailed like screams from the earth itself. They weren't the sharp, blaring kind that warned of a fire or a lockdown. This sound was lower, deeper, like a growl from some massive beast stirring awake after a long, dangerous sleep. Colonel Wells grabbed Darius by the wrist, his grip tighter now. Everyone to secure stations. Shield the room, he barked. Panic didn't set in, but urgency did. The people in the chamber moved like soldiers. No wasted steps. No questions. The floor split open and steel panels rose, clicking into place to form a dome around the room. One after another, barriers slid into position over screens, vents, and doors until the room looked more like a vault than a command center. But nothing could drown out that sound above. Darius clutched the strange silver device in his hand, feeling it vibrate softly. It was warm now, too warm for metal. Like it was alive. What is this thing? He asked again, voice shaking. His dad didn't look at him. His eyes were on the ceiling, on the reinforced steel, now being tested by the impact of heavy footsteps overhead. It's called the key light, he finally said. And if they breach this room, you press that button on the side, and you run. Don't think. Don't wait for me. Just run. But what does it do? Darius asked again, louder. It protects you. From what? Colonel Wells looked at him, truly looked, and Darius saw it for the first time. The fear, not of death, not of failure, but of losing him. From yourself, he said. The room jolted. Something, no, someone, had landed directly above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then silence. No sirens. No voices. Just stillness. Darius held his breath. And then, crack. The steel above them tore open like paper. A single black boot dropped down from the ceiling. It hit the floor with a clang. Another figure followed, lowering itself with eerie grace. Tall, slender, not the same cloaked intruder from earlier. This one wore armor, black, skin tight, covered in lines of red light that pulsed like veins. Its face was hidden behind a smooth, reflective mask. But when it turned to look at Darius, he felt it. Something moved inside him. A pressure in his chest, like a rope being pulled tight around his heart. Darius Wells, the voice said from behind the mask, smooth and electric, vibrating the air. No one moved. You are the last. Colonel Wells stepped in front of Darius, hand on the sidearm at his hip. I don't care who sent you, he growled. He's under my protection. I know, the figure replied. That's why we waited. That's why we watched. But the lock has broken. What lock? Darius asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure took another step forward. The one inside you. Everyone raised their weapons. Colonel Wells held up a hand. Don't fire unless I give the order. The figure tilted its head. He doesn't know, does he? It said softly. They kept it from him. They always keep it from the last one. Darius shook his head. Kept what from me? The figure raised one hand. Not threatening, almost gentle. The truth. About who you are. What you are. The silver device in Darius's hand glowed suddenly. The figure smiled behind its mask. The keylight recognizes you. That's how we know it's time. Darius turned to his dad. What is he talking about? Colonel Wells took a step forward. You don't speak to him. You don't tell him anything. But he needs to know, the figure said. The boy is not just your son. He's the... Enough, Colonel Wells snapped, and for the first time in his life, Darius saw his father draw a weapon. But before anyone could do anything, the red-veined figure moved. In a blur, it was suddenly in front of them. Every gun in the room fired. Bright flashes lit the chamber like a strobe light. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. But the figure didn't fall. The bullets bounced off the armor, ricocheting off the walls. One grazed Darius's shoulder, and he cried out, stumbling back. Cease fire. Colonel Wells roared. Too late. The figure raised one hand. The air bent. A shock wave blasted outward like a bomb of invisible force. Everyone was thrown off their feet. Screens shattered. Tables flipped. Alarms died. And in the center of the room, surrounded by a crater of crushed floor tiles, the figure stood untouched. Darius lay on the ground, ears ringing. The silver device had rolled from his hand. He scrambled to grab it, but the figure stepped on it. No, the figure said, looking down at him. You don't need it anymore. Darius stared into the red reflection of his own terrified face in the mask. Why me? He whispered. The figure knelt beside him. Because your bloodline was the last to be hidden. Because the others are gone. Because your heart holds the last key to the gate. And because the world is about to forget what peace ever was. Then the figure reached for him. But just as its hand brushed Darius's skin, a blinding light erupted from his chest. White hot, brighter than the sun. The figure screamed, an unholy, inhuman screech. The entire room shook. Colonel Wells shielded his eyes. Everyone else ducked or fell back. The light pulsed again, and again, and then, silence. When the light faded, the figure was gone. Vanished. Only a scorch mark remained on the floor. Darius was still lying there. But something was different. His hands glowed faintly with a soft, golden shimmer. His breathing was fast, but steady. The silver device, the keylight, was back in his hand. Colonel Wells rushed to him, kneeling beside him. Are you okay? Darius nodded slowly, his eyes wide. What just happened? His dad looked around at the wrecked chamber, the stunned faces, the hole in the ceiling, and the mark on the floor. Then he looked at his son. You woke up, he said. Darius's heart pounded. He felt stronger, faster, more awake than ever. But also scared. I didn't mean to, he said quietly. I know, his dad said. But now that you have. He stood up, looking at everyone in the room. We don't have a choice anymore. One of the officers spoke up. Sir, if he's activated, there's no way to hide him now. The entire network will detect it. I know, Colonel Wells said. And if they know who he is, they'll come for him. He looked down at Darius. But we won't let them take you. Darius stood up slowly, holding the keylight close. I'm not going anywhere without answers, he said. You owe me that much. Colonel Wells nodded. I'll tell you everything, he said. About the project. About the gate. About what you are. Darius felt a chill go down his spine. And what am I? He asked. His dad hesitated. Then came the answer. You're not just my son. He paused. You're the last sentinel. Before Darius could ask what that meant, the emergency radio buzzed on a nearby table. A woman's panicked voice shouted through the speaker. We've lost contact with the New York branch. They're gone, everyone. No signs. No survivors. It started. Colonel Wells closed his eyes and whispered, "God help us all." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. Darius's mind raced. "What started?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Colonel Wells turned to the control panel, his fingers moving with swift precision across the buttons. "The gate has opened," he muttered to himself, more to the equipment in front of him than to anyone else. "What does that mean?" Darius asked again, his voice tight with fear. The woman at the control panel, who had been monitoring the emergency radio, glanced over her shoulder, her face pale. "The gate is She stopped, seeing the look in Colonel Wells' eyes. "Not now," he snapped, the words laced with urgency. "Give me a line to the New York branch." "Now." She nodded quickly, fingers flying over the keyboard as static filled the room. "Colonel," another man in the room spoke up, his voice filled with disbelief. "What is going on? What is this gate?" But before Colonel Wells could respond, the emergency radio buzzed again, cutting through the tension. This time, the voice on the other end was frantic. "Colonel Wells, this is Major Daniels in New York. Do you copy?" "We copy," Wells answered, his voice sharp. "What's happening?" "Report, Major." The voice on the radio faltered. There was a moment of silence, followed by a loud crash, like metal twisting, crumpling under immense pressure. "We've lost containment. The gate, it's..." Another crash, and then static. The woman at the control panel froze. "The gate," she whispered, her hand hovering over the screen. "It's not supposed to be activated for another month." Colonel Wells's face hardened. "It's happening now. Everything we've been trying to prevent, it's happening." "Prevent?" Darius echoed. "What are you talking about?" Wells didn't answer him immediately. He was staring at the screen, his face grim. Then, finally, he turned to Darius, his voice low. "The gate is a doorway. It connects this world to others. But it's not just any door. It's a gate to a place, our world's counterpart. It's been locked for centuries. The activation means that the other side is about to invade. And once it opens fully, the world as we know it will change forever." Darius's heart pounded in his chest. "Invade? What do you mean? Who's on the other side?" Wells hesitated, then looked at his son, his eyes filled with a sorrow that Darius couldn't understand. "You'll meet them soon enough. And you'll have to make a choice." "Choice?" Darius repeated, feeling a lump form in his throat. "What kind of choice?" But before Wells could answer, the entire chamber shuddered again. This time, it wasn't a tremor, it was a deliberate, powerful force. The walls groaned, and the lights flickered as the entire building seemed to strain under an invisible pressure. "Stay with me, Darius," Colonel Wells said urgently, grabbing his arm. "We need to move, now." The room had descended into chaos. People were scrambling, shouting orders, but it all felt distant to Darius, like it was happening in someone else's nightmare. "Where are we going?" Darius asked, trying to keep up as his father led him through the narrow hallway. "To the underground network," Wells replied, his voice clipped. "The only way to stop this is to reach the source. And it's going to take everything we have to close the gate before it fully opens." They reached another door at the far end of the hallway, this one reinforced, with a keypad next to it. "Hold on, Darius," Wells said as he quickly typed in a code. The door clicked open with a heavy thud, and they rushed inside. Behind them, the door slammed shut. The new room was different from the others. It was quieter, colder. The walls were lined with strange equipment, tubes filled with glowing liquids, and screens displaying complex data. "This is where we make our stand," Wells said, walking to a large control panel in the center of the room. "I've kept this hidden for years, because it was the only thing that could stop the gate from opening." He flipped a switch, and the entire room hummed to life. Darius glanced around, but his mind was still reeling. "So what happens now?" Wells didn't look at him. Instead, he focused on the monitors, typing commands into the control panel. "The gate is part of an ancient experiment, Project Echelon. It was designed to connect this world to another dimension, one where the balance of power is different." He paused, searching for the right words. "The creatures that live on the other side, they're not like us. They were locked away to protect our world. But now they're getting free. And the only way to stop them is to close the gate permanently." "Then why don't we just close it?" Darius asked. "We can't," Wells replied, his voice tense. The gate only responds to one thing, the sentinel. And that's where you come in. Darius felt a chill run through him. Me? I don't understand. What's a sentinel? Wells turned to face him, his expression unreadable. You, Darius. You're the last of the sentinels. The guardians who were meant to protect this world from the forces beyond the gate. You were born to close it, to prevent the invasion. But the power it requires, he trailed off, his voice thick with regret. It's more than anyone should have to bear. Darius swallowed hard. He felt the weight of his father's words settle over him like a blanket of stone. His chest felt tight, and the strange sensation of warmth from the keylight pulsed in his hand. How do I stop it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Wells didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screens, his fingers flying over the controls. Everything is in place, he finally said. But there's a price. If the gate is to close completely, it will take all of your energy. Your life force. Darius's breath hitched. What? His dad turned to him then, his eyes full of sorrow. The Sentinel's power comes from the very essence of their being. Once you activate the gate's closure, it will drain you until you have nothing left. No, Darius said, shaking his head. I won't do it. I don't want to die. Wells walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Son, he said softly, I know you don't understand. But you're the only one who can do this. Without you, our world will fall. There is no other way. The walls shook again, this time more violently. The ceiling groaned, and dust rained down from above. We're out of time, Wells said urgently, his eyes darting between Darius and the control panel. You don't have a choice anymore. It's now or never. Darius's heart thundered in his chest. He felt the pull of the keylight, stronger now. It seemed to hum in his hand, as if it was urging him to do something. But the weight of his father's words pressed on him like 1,000 pounds. He didn't want to die. He wasn't ready. I can't, Darius said, stepping back, panic rising in his chest. His dad reached out to him, but the moment his hand touched Darius's shoulder, a voice blasted through the intercom. Colonel Wells, the voice shouted. We've lost contact with the other branches. The invasion, it's begun. The room shook again, and this time the sound wasn't coming from above. It was coming from within the building. Darius looked at his father. It's too late, isn't it? Wells looked back at him, guilt, sadness, and fear in his eyes. It's up to you now, Darius. We don't have a choice. The floor trembled beneath their feet. And somewhere, deep inside Darius, something stirred. The gate was opening, and it was time to make a choice. The floor trembled so hard Darius had to grab the edge of the console to steady himself. Lights flickered. Sirens wailed in the distance. A deep, groaning sound, like metal being bent by something impossibly strong, echoed through the underground compound. Colonel Wells stared at the monitor. We've lost full contact with the eastern corridor, he muttered. They're inside now. Darius felt like the walls were closing in. He clutched the keylight tighter. The warmth inside it had turned into a low, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. It pulsed up his arm, steady and strong. He looked at his father. What if I try, and I can't do it? You will, his father said with certainty. Because you have to. Another explosion shook the base. This one was closer. A second later, the emergency lights switched to solid red. Then came the voice. It wasn't through the speakers this time. It was inside Darius's head. We see you. He gasped, staggering back. Colonel Wells spun. What happened? Darius stared straight ahead, but he wasn't seeing the room anymore. He was seeing something else. A world of endless black skies and ash-covered ground. Giant stone towers spiraling into darkness. Shapes moving in the distance, tall, twisted, and wrong. They walked on two legs, but didn't look human. Their faces were bone-white masks that blinked with red lights. Their hands were claws. And in the center of it all, the gate. It was enormous. Two jagged stone monoliths cracked open like a scar in the air. Between them floated pure darkness, swirling like smoke. He heard whispers now. Dozens. Hundreds. Open it. You are the vessel. Let us in. He jerked backward, blinking hard. He was back in the control room, his breathing ragged. They're talking to me, he whispered. From the other side. Colonel Wells didn't hesitate. He opened a case on the wall and pulled out a narrow metal wristband. You need to wear this, he said, clamping it on Darius's arm. It'll help stabilize your connection. Keep your mind from burning out. Darius looked down at the device. It wrapped around his wrist like a silver snake, then tightened with a soft hiss. Why me? Darius asked again. Why not someone else? Because you were born for it, his father said, voice trembling now. And because they've already taken the others. Darius looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Colonel Wells paused. Then, with a long, heavy breath, he said, there were others like you. Other children, chosen from birth. They were hidden, trained, and prepared to become sentinels. But one by one, they vanished, disappeared. Some were taken, some changed. Darius's hands clenched. So I'm the last? Colonel Wells nodded. You are. Then a crackling came through the speakers. This is Dr. Ramos in engineering. We've lost containment in Lab 3. They've breached the genetic vault. Colonel Wells turned back to the console. They're not just trying to open the gate. They want what's inside you. Darius looked up, startled. What's inside me? The spark, his father answered. The core energy of the gate. A fragment of the original force that locked them out centuries ago. They can't reopen it fully until they corrupt it. Darius felt cold all over. And if they do, they don't just enter our world, his father said grimly. They replace it. Before Darius could ask more, the compound's loudspeakers crackled again, and then fell silent. Every screen in the room went dark. The red lights faded. And for a moment, there was only silence. Then, the overhead door tore open with a metallic shriek. Darius turned, heart pounding. A group of soldiers ran into the room, panting, bleeding, armor shredded. Behind them, through the smoke, came the things from his vision. They were real. 7 feet tall, pale bone-like armor, glowing red eyes. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets being yanked on strings. As they stepped into the light, their heads tilted in perfect unison at Darius. One stepped forward, lifting a long, blade-like arm. The key is awake, it said in a voice that sounded like glass breaking underwater. Colonel Wells drew his sidearm and fired 3 times. Bam, bam, bam. But the creature didn't flinch. The bullets hit its armor and dropped like pebbles. Darius, Wells shouted. Now, use the key light. Darius looked down at the device, now glowing white-hot in his hand. I don't know how. Think, his dad yelled. It responds to your will, not your words. The creatures moved forward. Darius closed his eyes. He thought of everything, of the laughter from Mrs. Harrow, of the smirks from Tyler, of being told no one like you could ever be important. Then he thought of his mother, her smile, her hugs. He thought of his dad, standing in front of him now, ready to give his life to protect him. He thought of the kids at school, the ones who'd laughed, but also the ones who hadn't. The quiet girl in the corner, the kid who always gave him his pencil. He thought of them, and the key light responded. With a sound like thunder cracking across the sky, it ignited, unleashing a beam of energy that slammed into the nearest creature and sent it flying into the wall with a sickening crunch. The others turned, screeching. Darius stepped forward, raising the key light. You're not getting through me, he said, his voice steady now. He raised his other hand, and light poured from his fingertips. The creatures shrieked and scattered, retreating back into the smoke. For a moment, all was still. Colonel Wells lowered his weapon, stunned. You did it, he breathed. You activated it. But Darius didn't answer. His eyes were glowing faintly gold now. His breathing slowed. His hands stopped trembling. He wasn't afraid anymore. But before Colonel Wells could speak again, a cold wind blew into the chamber. The smoke parted, and there stood a tall, robed figure. Not armored. Not a monster. Human. Or something close to it. Its face was hidden under a hood, but its voice was calm, chilling. We only needed the spark, it said softly. Now that it's lit, the gate will open itself. Then, with a wave of its hand, the floor beneath it cracked open. And far below, Darius saw it. A swirling black spiral. Growing. The gate. Colonel Wells pulled Darius back, his voice cracking. We're too late. The figure stepped aside, letting the spiral expand. Soon, it whispered, your world will forget sunlight. Darius looked at his father, then at the spiral. No, he said. He raised the key light. But just as he did, the ground shook again, and the spiral pulled them both in. Darius and his father fell. Down, down, into the dark. And the gate opened. Darius felt like he was falling forever. There was no wind, no sound. Just weightlessness, like being dropped into a dream with no end. His father's hand was gripped tightly around his wrist, their bodies tumbling through the black spiral that had erupted from the gate. The deeper they fell, the stranger everything became. Colors bled from the edges of reality. Gravity twisted. Time felt like it folded in on itself. Darius saw flashes of memory. Some his, some he couldn't recognize. A baby crying in a storm. A field of golden grass stretching for miles. A group of children standing in a circle around something glowing in the dirt. And then, a voice. Not a whisper this time, but a song. Low, ancient, powerful. It wasn't in English or any language Darius knew, but somehow he understood it. Return the key. Close the breach, or the world will burn. He gasped, and just like that, the falling stopped. Whump. Darius slammed into something soft, like sand. His father landed beside him with a grunt, rolling over and coughing. They were alive, but where they were wasn't Earth. Darius sat up slowly, brushing gritty, ash-colored dust from his arms. The sky above them was cracked like broken glass, shifting colors, blue one second, red the next. 2 moons hung in the air, one full, one crescent. The air smelled like metal and fire. In the distance, jagged black towers reached into the sky. The ground was covered in strange markings, almost like veins glowing beneath the surface. Lightning arced sideways across the clouds. This is the other side, Colonel Wells whispered. The space between worlds. The breach, Darius said without thinking. The words slipped out of his mouth like he'd always known them. He stood up, gripping the key light. Why did it bring us here? Before his father could answer, a crack echoed across the ash plains. Darius turned. A group of shadow-like creatures stood on a nearby ridge. But these weren't like the ones from the compound. They were smaller, hunched, moving in odd, twitchy patterns. Their eyes glowed a dull yellow. They hadn't seen Darius and his father yet. Colonel Wells dropped to a crouch. We need to move. Now. They slid behind a large stone outcropping shaped like the ribs of some ancient beast. The dust around it pulsed slightly, like the world itself was breathing. Where do we go? Darius asked. Colonel Wells looked around. We find a gate fragment. If we can activate it from this side, maybe we can reverse the pull, send you back through. You mean us, right? Colonel Wells didn't answer. Darius's heart dropped. You're not coming, are you? His father looked at him, something heavy in his eyes. This place, it tears at the body if you stay too long. You've got the key light. You'll survive it. I won't. No, Darius said quickly. We'll find a way together. Colonel Wells gave a tight, sad smile. That's the plan. But Darius knew. Deep down he knew. They crouched in the shadows and started moving, staying low, weaving through the ruins of what looked like an ancient city. The buildings were crumbled stone and twisted glass, but some of them pulsed faintly with blue energy. They passed through a broken arch covered in glyphs, and Darius felt the key light grow warm. He was getting closer to something. After what felt like hours of silent, cautious movement, they came to a clearing. In the center stood a platform, circular, floating slightly off the ground, held in place by 3 stone monoliths. Strange metal prongs stuck out from the base, and a glowing blue crystal hovered above it all. The fragment, Colonel Wells breathed. That's our way out. Darius stepped forward, but the ground beneath them suddenly growled. The dust shifted. Something enormous moved beneath it. Then, a shape exploded upward from the ground. It wasn't like the creatures before. It was massive, 20 feet tall, with arms like jagged blades and a mouth that split across its chest. Dozens of red eyes blinked open all over its body. The keylight pulsed hard in Darius's hand. The creature roared and charged. Colonel Wells shouted, "Run!" and fired his weapon. The bullets sparked uselessly off its thick armor. Darius bolted for the platform, the ground quaking beneath his feet. He reached the base and slammed the key light into the crystal. Nothing happened. The creature lunged. Colonel Wells ran between them, firing again, drawing its attention. You have to focus, he yelled. The key light listens to your will. Darius shut his eyes. He pictured home, his mother, his room, the classroom, the sunlight on his face. He pictured Earth. The key light surged with heat. He reached up and grabbed the crystal with both hands. It screamed with energy. Light burst from the platform, forming a vertical ring of fire and sparks. Another gate. The creature shrieked behind him. He turned just in time to see it throw Colonel Wells to the ground. Dad. Colonel Wells looked up, blood on his lip. Go. I'm not leaving you. You're not. You're going home. That's an order. The creature raised a claw. Colonel Wells rolled to the side and threw a small, round device into the air. Shield flare. The device exploded in a flash of white light, stunning the creature momentarily. Colonel Wells staggered to his feet and shoved Darius toward the ring of light. Go now, son. You can still stop this. Darius stared at him. I love you, his father said. Darius's voice cracked. I love you too. He turned, just as the creature roared and lunged again. Darius dove into the gate, and everything went white. When he woke, he was on the floor of the original chamber, surrounded by soldiers. The gate behind him was sealed. The control team looked stunned. Sir, one whispered. He made it back. Alone. Darius sat up slowly. He looked around. His dad wasn't there, and the gate was completely sealed. A woman in a gray uniform stepped forward. Darius Wells, she said gently. You're safe. But things have changed. Darius stood, still holding the key light, now dim and cool in his hand. What changed? She tapped a control pad. A screen lit up behind her. It showed dozens of cities, New York, LA, Chicago, all with red symbols pulsing next to their names. Then she said the words that froze Darius's blood. They're not waiting anymore. The invasion has begun. The screen glowed red. Rows of U.S. cities blinked in and out of view, each name followed by a chilling symbol, a single, jagged eye, marked with a slash through its center. The same symbol that had been stamped in silver on the envelope Darius received. Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Houston, all blinking red, all marked. Darius stared at the map in disbelief. This isn't real. This can't be happening. The woman in the gray uniform, her name tag read Lieutenant Commander Shaw, didn't blink. It's real, she said, her voice tight. Your return from the breach triggered a surge of energy across the gate network. It's like they were waiting for you to open the final lock. Darius gripped the key light. It pulsed faintly, now a dull blue. But I closed it. I sealed the gate. She shook her head slowly. No, you sealed one. But there are others, buried beneath the earth, hidden inside ancient cities, forgotten temples, lost zones. That first gate was just the keystone. He felt the world tilt under his feet. You're saying there's more of them? She walked to the map, tapping her finger on a new flashing location, Memphis, Tennessee. We just lost contact with a research facility there. That was the second gate. It's been breached. By who? Darius asked, though the answer was already burning in his gut. A new video feed popped up on the screen. Grainy. Static-ridden. A street camera view from Memphis. People running. Screaming. Shadows moving fast. Too fast to be human. Long limbs. Masked faces. A swarm of them pouring out of a cracked hole in the center of a public park. The feed went black. Lieutenant Commander Shaw turned back to him. They're not coming anymore, she said. They're here. Darius's hands trembled. What do we do now? Before she could answer, the door to the command room burst open. A new soldier ran in, face pale with fear. Ma'am, we've got movement on the perimeter. Dozens of them. They're not hiding this time. Everyone moved at once. Alarms wailed again. Boots thundered against the floor. The command center lit up with flashing signals, warning messages, and real-time combat reports. Darius stood frozen in the middle of the chaos. This is happening because of me, he thought. Because I opened the gate. The room began to blur, his breath catching in his throat. Then, click, a hand landed on his shoulder. He turned. It was Shaw. Her eyes were locked on his. Listen to me, Darius. You didn't start this. You just woke up to it. But you're not alone. You are the last sentinel. Yes, but that doesn't mean you're the last hope. I don't know how to fight them, he whispered. I didn't even know what I was until yesterday. Then you learn, she said. We don't have a choice. She pulled a thin tablet from her belt and handed it to him. On it was a single blinking file. Project, Sentinel, active subject, Darius Wells. Status, awakened. Subcore match detected, 1. He stared at it. What's this? Shaw hesitated. You're not the only one with the spark. Darius's heart skipped. He tapped the file. A photo appeared. It was a girl. Maybe his age. Black, with sharp eyes and long braids, wearing a school uniform. She stood in front of a stone arch covered in the same symbols Darius had seen inside the gate chamber. Underneath her photo was a name. Amari Blake, Level 1 Sentinel candidate, status, unknown. She's in Louisiana, Shaw said. Last signal we received came from a sanctuary site just outside New Orleans. Then, silence. You think she's like me? Darius asked. I think she's the only person on the planet who might understand what you're going through. The key light pulsed again, this time stronger, as if it recognized the name. Darius clenched his jaw. Then we need to find her. Shaw nodded. We have a recon team prepping to move. You'll ride with them. It won't be easy. These creatures, they hunt spark signatures now. That means they'll come for you. Fast. I'm not hiding, Darius said. Shaw smirked, then pressed a button on the wall. A section of the far room shifted, revealing a long, black container. It hissed open, revealing what looked like armor, sleek, flexible, woven with strips of metal and lined with symbols that glowed faintly. Designed for sentinels, she said. Built to channel the key light. It won't make you invincible, but it will keep you alive longer than a hoodie and jeans. Darius stepped forward, swallowing hard. Let's suit up then. 30 minutes later, the skies over the eastern base were covered in thick, gray clouds. Thunder rolled in the distance. The transport vehicle, a jet-black craft with no wings, hovered just above the launch pad. Soldiers loaded supplies and weapons, barking orders. The world was now a war zone. Darius stood near the ramp, wearing his new armor. The key light was embedded into a panel on his chest. It glowed softly with every beat of his heart. As he climbed the ramp, a voice called out behind him. Hey, he turned. It was Shaw. She handed him a folded note. Your father wrote this before you came back. I think he knew you'd find your way. Darius took the paper, hands shaking. The jet engines roared to life. Inside, as the ramp closed behind him, he unfolded the note. In his father's handwriting, it read, Darius, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back. That's okay. I made my choice. Now it's your turn. You're stronger than you think. Smarter. Braver. You just haven't had to be, until now. Trust your instincts. Follow the key light. And find the others. The world's counting on you, son. But more than that, I believe in you. Always. Dad. Darius didn't cry. He folded the note, slid it into a pocket on his armor, and sat back. The pilot's voice echoed overhead. Next stop, New Orleans. Buckle in. As the jet lifted off, Darius looked out the window. Far below, in the fields and cities they passed, he could already see them, shadows moving just beneath the surface. The war had begun, but somewhere out there, another sentinel was waiting. Rain pounded the sleek black transport as it cut through stormy skies over Louisiana. Lightning forked across the clouds, lighting up a landscape below that didn't look like home anymore. Roads were broken. Entire blocks were dark. Something deep and strange hummed in the air like static before a thunderclap. Darius sat strapped into a seat near the rear of the craft, hands resting on the armrests, eyes locked on the storm outside. The key light, now nestled at the center of his chest plate, pulsed slowly, steady as a heartbeat. It had been glowing brighter ever since they crossed into Louisiana airspace, responding to something in the land. Or someone. The recon unit sat silently around him. 6 heavily armored soldiers from Sentinel Command's elite escort force. They were trained to defend spark-bearing individuals like Darius. None of them spoke much. They just checked their weapons and scanned the landscape with cold, focused eyes. At the front, the lead officer stood. She was tall, brown-skinned, her hair pulled tight into a braid, eyes fierce and locked with purpose. Her name was Captain Riley, and she didn't look impressed by Darius when they first met. You're the kid with the glow rock in your chest? She'd said before they boarded. You don't look like much. But now, as the jet began to descend, she stepped back toward him. We're approaching the drop zone, she said over the engine's roar. Your contact signal, the one from Amari, originated from a safe house in the Garden District near an old church. The signal stopped 2 nights ago. Darius nodded. Do we know why? Not yet, she replied. But I'll tell you what I do know. This area's been dark ever since the second gate opened. No recon drones make it in. Radio silence. Ground team went missing last week. No bodies found. Darius didn't blink. So you're saying we're going in blind? Exactly, she said. And I don't like blind. The transport jolted slightly as it dropped through the cloud cover. Suddenly, the whole city came into view. Or what was left of it. New Orleans was barely recognizable. Streets were cracked open with jagged black scars. Trees were burned, their limbs twisted like claws. The Mississippi River had turned an eerie shade of green-gray and swirled unnaturally, as if some invisible force was tugging at it. Most chilling of all, black spires had pierced through the ground in random spots across the city, like giant thorns driven into the earth. They pulsed red. Darius felt it immediately. The key light reacted. Hotter, heavier, almost buzzing like a tuning fork. Captain Riley turned to him. "You okay?" He nodded, even though his insides were swirling like a hurricane. As the transport hovered over the Garden District, ropes dropped from the open rear hatch. Captain Riley looked at him. "Stay close to me. Don't go off instinct unless I say it's safe. And if you see anything that's not from this world, you run, unless you're 100% sure you can handle it." "Got it," Darius said, adjusting his gloves. Then he stepped to the edge of the ramp, took a deep breath, and jumped. The city smelled like ash and wet metal. As their boots hit the ground, Darius felt it even stronger. Something ancient was here, hiding, breathing, watching. The soldiers fanned out, weapons ready, eyes scanning rooftops and alleys. Captain Riley pointed at an old church partially swallowed by vines and shadow. The roof was caved in, and the bell tower was cracked open like a rotten tooth. "That's where the signal came from," she said. They moved quickly. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Broken pews were scattered across the sanctuary. Stained glass windows were shattered, the floor slick with rainwater and soot. Darius swept his light across the walls and froze. There, scratched deep into the brick behind the altar, was a symbol. The same symbol from his envelope. The jagged eye with the slash through it. "Someone marked this," he said. Captain Riley approached. Or something. Just then, a noise. From the balcony above. Darius's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" The soldiers trained their weapons toward the dark archway leading up the staircase. Then a voice rang out. Quiet, trembling, young. "Don't shoot." Everyone froze. Out of the shadows stepped a girl, arms raised. She was about Darius's age. Black, with long braids and sharp, intelligent eyes. Her uniform was torn, her face bruised. But her eyes locked on Darius's key light, and her breath caught. "You have one too." He blinked. "Amari." She nodded slowly. "You made it." The room exhaled. Darius stepped forward. "We came for you." But before she could speak again, something screeched from outside. The walls shook. The soldiers turned. Captain Riley drew her blade, carved from obsidian and lined with glowing runes. "Positions." The door exploded inward. A wave of creatures flooded through, cloaked in shadow, their arms long and serrated like jagged metal. They didn't walk. They skittered. Fast. Loud. Darius grabbed Amari and pulled her behind a broken pew. She was trembling. "They found me 2 nights ago. I've been hiding in here ever since." Darius activated the key light. A pulse of golden light spread from his chest, forming a shield that knocked back the first creature. Amari gasped. "You control it?" "I'm learning." The soldiers opened fire. Captain Riley lunged into the fray, moving like a storm, cutting down 2 of the creatures in a flash. But for every one that fell, 2 more poured in. Darius turned to Amari. "Do you have your key light?" She nodded and pulled something from around her neck. A smaller version, like a pendant, glowing dimly. "It's never activated," she whispered. "Not like yours." "Then let's try it now." He reached out and touched her hand, placing his key light over hers. The moment they connected, boom, a surge of blue and gold light exploded between them, blasting every shadow creature in the room off their feet. Even Captain Riley stumbled back, shielding her eyes. Amari's pendant glowed white-hot. She gasped. "I feel it," she whispered. Outside, a horrible, mechanical howl echoed through the streets. Then, a shape moved into view, taller than a house, built like a humanoid machine, covered in armor that pulsed with red glyphs. It stepped into the courtyard with a sound like steel grinding steel. The air froze. Darius and Amari stood side by side. The creature raised a long staff made of black bone. Captain Riley shouted, "That's not a scout. That's a warden. We need to evac now." But the warden wasn't attacking. It pointed directly at Darius and spoke in a voice made of thunder and whispers. "The Chosen has found the Spark Sister. The gate calls them both. They will not leave this city alive." Then, With a single motion, the warden raised the staff and drove it into the ground. The city split. The earth cracked open down the middle of the garden district. Black light poured out of the fissure. Buildings collapsed. The church began to fall in on itself. Captain Riley screamed into her comm. Evac route blocked. We need airlift now. But Darius wasn't looking at the warden anymore. He was looking into the pit, because from inside it, a third gate was rising, towering, complete, and open. The third gate rose like a nightmare made real, two jagged black pillars twisting into the sky, connected by a swirling vortex of darkness at their center. Glyphs carved deep into the stone flared with pulsing red light, casting hellish shadows across the ruins of the garden district. The very air seemed to shudder around it, bending light, bending reality. Darius stood frozen. Beside him, Amari's newly awakened key light glowed bright white against her chest, pulsing in sync with Darius's own. The resonance between them vibrated in his bones, a steady drumbeat of power and fear. Around them, the soldiers struggled to regroup. Captain Riley dragged a wounded teammate out from beneath fallen debris, shouting orders into her comm, her voice breaking through the chaos. But none of it mattered, because the gate was open now, and something was coming through. A black mist poured from the opening, thick like tar. Then came shapes, twisted, shuddering things with too many limbs and mouths where faces should be. They moved like liquid, slithering across cracked pavement and broken glass, eyes glowing dimly under the dark veil of their bodies. Worse than the foot soldiers, worse than the skittering scouts. These were gateborn. Darius's chest burned as the key light responded, brighter than ever before. They're not just coming through, he whispered. They're being pulled. Amari gritted her teeth. What do you mean? I don't know how I know, he said, voice shaking. But that gate isn't just open. It's calling them. Like a magnet. Captain Riley raced to them. We've got to move now. Airlift is 3 minutes out, but that gate won't wait. We can't leave it open, Darius said, backing up as the mist crept closer. If we do, this entire state goes under. Riley's jaw clenched. And how exactly do you plan to close a gate that size? Darius turned to Amari. Their eyes locked. And in that moment, something passed between them, something deep and ancient. A memory that wasn't theirs. A voice from the keylight itself. 2 sparks make the seal. 1 awakens. 1 anchors. Both endure. Amari's eyes widened. You heard it too? Darius nodded slowly. We have to stand together. Inside the gate's pull. Captain Riley looked horrified. You step inside that vortex, and we lose you. You could be torn apart, erased, rewritten. We don't have a choice, Darius said. It wants us. If we go willingly, we might be able to override the gate's tether and shut it down from the core. Riley hesitated, then drew her sidearm and turned toward the gate. You've got 2 minutes. We'll hold the line. Thank you, Darius said. The soldiers began forming a perimeter around the rising monsters, shouting, firing, pushing back against an enemy no one fully understood. And in the middle of it all, 2 kids, barely teenagers, ran straight toward the heart of the storm. The closer they got, the heavier the air became. It felt like swimming through wet cement, like gravity itself didn't want them to move. The mist clung to their legs, pulling, whispering. But the keylight pulsed stronger, stronger, stronger. Together, they reached the gate and stepped through. They fell, but not like before, not weightless or slow. This time was violent, instant, like being yanked out of their own skin. Then, they were standing on solid ground. Except it wasn't ground. It was a surface made of shimmering silver light, stretching forever in all directions. The sky above them was a churning storm of stars and shadows. Time felt wrong. Darius could feel yesterday brushing against his neck, and tomorrow pulsing at his feet. At the center of the plain was a pedestal, floating, glowing. Atop it sat a black crystal orb, pulsing with red. Amari stared at it. That's the tether. Darius stepped forward. The closer he got, the louder the voices became in his head. You were never meant to survive this. Give us the light. Give us your fear. Darius shook his head. No. The keylight blazed. Behind him, Amari's did too. And then, in perfect rhythm, they lifted their hands and touched the orb. It screamed. Not a sound. A feeling. A horrible wave of sorrow and rage and hunger. The gateborn shrieked from the other side. And slowly, the red light in the orb began to fade. But the pedestal cracked. Darius gasped. It's not enough. We're not strong enough. Yes, we are, Amari said. She reached out and took his hand. Their key lights merged, a blinding white flash exploding from the space between them, racing through the realm of the gate, cutting through the storm like lightning splitting a mountain. The orb shattered. The silver floor cracked. The realm collapsed inward. And then, silence. When Darius opened his eyes, he was lying in the courtyard where the gate had stood. It was gone. The black pillars had crumbled into ash. The swirling vortex was no more. The sky was clearing. The city was still broken, but the gate was closed. Amari sat beside him, blinking slowly. You okay? He asked, voice hoarse. She nodded. Tired. But yeah. Captain Riley jogged up to them, eyes wide. You did it. You closed it. No, Darius said. We did. She helped them both to their feet. You two just bought this world some time. Behind them, medics were treating the wounded. Soldiers dragged the remaining shadow creatures into containment vehicles. The mist was gone. The warden? Destroyed in the gate's collapse. But Darius knew this wasn't over. He looked at the horizon. There's more gates, he said. Isn't there? Captain Riley nodded grimly. At least 5. Maybe more. Amari sighed. And we're the only ones who can stop them. Riley looked at them both. Not anymore, she said. She pulled a tablet from her pouch and handed it to Darius. On it was a list. Confirmed spark-active individuals, 4. Status, dormant/unawakened. Locations, unknown. Darius's eyes widened. There are others. Riley nodded. And we're going to find them. Then a soldier called from across the field. Captain, you need to hear this. Riley ran over, voice sharp. What is it? The soldier held up a receiver. Intercepted transmission. Origin unknown. Just started broadcasting. A voice came through. Chilling, calm, unnatural. The sentinels rise again. Good. Let them gather. Let them believe. Let them run. We are patient. We are infinite. And when the final gate opens, they will kneel. The signal cut. The radio fell silent. And Darius turned to Amari with a single, steady breath. Then we better find the others fast. Night fell like a curtain of iron over Baton Rouge. The city had become a fortress, transformed in just hours by Sentinel Command into one of Earth's last safe zones. Giant anti-gate field emitters lined the streets, forming invisible barriers between the known world and the growing chaos beyond it. Armed convoys moved like clockwork. Drones patrolled the skies. Everyone, soldiers, scientists, survivors, had one eye on their duty and the other on the sky. But in the center of it all, tucked behind reinforced walls and humming security towers, was a place known only as Sanctum. It wasn't on any map. And inside, Darius Wells stood at the edge of a giant illuminated floor map. 5 glowing red gate markers flashing steadily, scattered across the world. Amari stood beside him, her arms crossed. She looked tired, but sharper now. Focused. More like a soldier than a scared girl hiding in a broken church. Across from them stood Captain Riley, along with 2 high-ranking Sentinel officers Darius hadn't met yet, a man named Commander Harlan and a woman with silver dreadlocks named Dr. Nia Langston, Chief of Spark Dynamics. On a large screen behind them, digital profiles flickered. Subject 1, Nico Jennings, age 14, male, last seen. Iceland, spark level, latent. Subject 2, Ezra Kim, age 13, male, last seen. South Korea, spark level, dormant. Subject 3, Zara Malik, age 15, female, last seen. Morocco, spark level, fading. Subject 4, Tatiana Reed, age 12, female, last seen. Detroit, spark level, stabilizing. Darius stared at the names, at the faint pulses beside each one. Some signals were strong. Some were flickering, like candlelight in the wind. One, Zara's, looked like it might disappear at any moment. These are the ones like us. Amari asked quietly. Dr. Langston nodded. Yes, we believe their sparks were suppressed, hidden, either by design or trauma. But your activation has triggered a kind of resonance across the globe. They're feeling it. Waking up. Commander Harlan stepped forward. Which also means the Gateborn feel it too. They'll be hunting the same people we are. Darius clenched his fists. They had no time. He turned to Riley. We go for Tatiana first. She's in the States. Detroit's closest. Riley gave him a sharp nod. Agreed. Prep team is already on standby. Darius looked over at Amari. She met his gaze, serious and unwavering. We move together. He nodded. Always. 24 hours later, their transport hovered above the jagged skyline of what was once Detroit. The city was a ghost. Skyscrapers were crumbling. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of streets. Overgrown weeds pushed through sidewalks. Storm clouds churned overhead like a lid about to slam shut. But worst of all were the marks. Darius saw them painted across the buildings in thick black ink. Jagged eye symbols, fresh, dripping. A warning. Or maybe a claim. The Gateborn had already been here. Movement on the ground. Captain Riley said over comms. Single spark pulse, fluctuating. She's close. Darius gripped his harness and jumped from the transport with Amari close behind. Their boots hit the asphalt with a splash. Rain had begun falling again, soft but steady. As they moved through the empty streets, their key lights began to glow, guiding them like compasses. Amari stopped suddenly. There, she said. At the edge of an old playground, behind a row of rusted swings, was a girl. She was tiny, barely 12, sitting beneath a broken slide with her knees hugged to her chest. Her clothes were torn, her cheeks streaked with ash. But her eyes glowed faintly blue. Darius crouched low, holding out his hand. Tatiana. The girl didn't move, but her spark flared. Darius felt it like a soft burst of wind. It's okay, he said. We're like you. You're not alone. She blinked. They came 2 nights ago. Shadows. They took my sister. She didn't have the light. Her voice broke. Darius swallowed hard. We're going to stop them, but we need your help. Tatiana looked at him, then at Amari, and finally at the key light on his chest. I hear it in my dreams, she whispered. The singing. Amari nodded. We do too. Then a scream. Sharp. Close. Terrifying. The trees shook. Captain Riley's voice cut through the comms. Multiple hostiles inbound. Gateborn class unknown. Forming a perimeter around your location. You're surrounded. Darius stood, pulling Tatiana gently behind him. We need to move, now. But they were already too late. From the mist came figures. Tall, spider-limbed creatures with masks that pulsed red. Some walked upright. Others crawled. All of them watched. Darius activated his key light. So did Amari. Tatiana's began to glow too. Faint, flickering. Stay behind us, Darius told her. The first creature lunged. Darius met it midair with a burst of golden energy that blasted it backward into a tree. Another hissed and dove for Amari, but she spun and sent a flash of light into its chest, splintering it in half. Tatiana screamed. A third creature leapt for her, but froze midair. Darius turned. Tatiana stood with her eyes glowing pure white. Her key light had ignited. The air around her shimmered. Her fear was gone. I said, leave me alone, she shouted, her voice like thunder. A pulse of energy exploded outward from her tiny frame, hurling the creatures in all directions. Buildings cracked. The ground split. Streetlights shattered in a wave of pure force. And when the dust cleared, only the 3 of them stood. Tatiana collapsed to her knees. Amari rushed forward, catching her. Darius stared at the smoking crater she'd created. Her spark just went nova, he whispered. She's not just a candidate. She's a conduit. Captain Riley's voice came through again. Inbound Gateborn reinforcements, 20+. You need to evac immediately. But Darius couldn't stop staring at the horizon. In the distance, at the center of the city, something was rising. A new gate, bigger than any he'd seen, covered in chains of black lightning and surrounded by spirals of floating stone. This one wasn't meant to pull creatures through. This one was meant to let someone out. Amari followed his gaze and paled. Oh no, she whispered. Tatiana stirred in her arms. That's the final gate, she said. Darius turned slowly. What? That's what the song says, Tatiana muttered, eyes still faintly glowing. The last one. The place he is waiting. Darius felt the weight of it settle on his chest. The war wasn't just here. It was peaking. And the real enemy, the one who'd whispered from behind every gate, who had sent shadows and monsters to hunt them, was no longer content to wait in the dark. He was rising, and Earth was the door. Smoke curled into the twilight sky above Detroit, painting streaks of gray against the last light of day. The city was still standing, but only barely. The streets were cracked and burned. Shadows fled into the ruins as the last of the Gate-born retreated, but everyone knew it was only temporary. A storm far greater than anything they'd seen was brewing. At the heart of the city, surrounded by the crumbled remains of skyscrapers and shattered pavement, stood the final gate. Massive, silent, waiting. Darius stood in front of it, his armor scorched, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Amari stood beside him, her braids matted with ash and sweat. Behind them, Captain Riley helped Tatiana into a secure evac transport as reinforcements formed a perimeter around the site. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. This was it. The last battle. The gate shimmered, not with red like the others, but with something worse, a black-violet hue, like bruised starlight. Electricity crackled along its edges. The stone spirals floating around it were turning faster now, reacting to Darius's presence. "He's inside," Tatiana whispered, her voice still distant. "The one who waits. The true enemy. The first Gateborn." Dr. Nia Langston's voice echoed in Darius's earpiece. "We've tracked the energy patterns. If this gate fully opens, every other sealed gate around the world will unlock. Instantly. A pause. And we won't survive what comes next." Darius knew. He could feel it, like a heartbeat behind the gate, getting faster. Amari stepped closer to him. "So what's the move?" Darius turned, meeting her eyes. "We end it. From the inside." Riley's voice crackled. "You can't. If you step through that gate." "We've done it before," Darius said. "This is no different." "Yes, it is," Riley snapped. "That's not just a breach. That's a throne. He's meant to rule from there." Amari placed a hand on Darius's shoulder. "Then we take the throne back." Tatiana stepped forward, her key light glowing faintly again. "I can help." "No," Darius said softly. "You've already done enough. You lit the fire. Let us carry it." He turned back toward the gate, the wind howling louder now, pulling at his clothes, tugging at his soul. Amari reached out. Their hands met, and together, they stepped into the final gate. There was no fall this time, no weightlessness, no in-between, just arrival. They landed on a black platform floating in a void of endless stars. Above them, storm clouds churned like galaxies tearing themselves apart. Below them, the gate's energy spiraled like a whirlpool of screams. And standing in the center of it all was him, the first Gateborn. He was tall, taller than anything human, with a cloak made of flickering shadows. His face was hidden by a bone-white mask etched with every gate symbol Darius had ever seen. And his eyes, they burned like dying suns. "So," he said, his voice echoing across eternity, "the last sentinel has come. With his spark sister. The final light." How poetic. Darius stepped forward. "We're not here to play your game. You are the game," the creature replied, spreading his arms. "Every spark, every gate, every lie, all roads led here. To this moment. To you." Amari raised her key light. "Then here's how it ends." The first Gateborn moved fast, impossibly fast. In a blink, he was in front of them, claws slashing, darkness rising. Darius blocked with a shield of golden light, gritting his teeth. Amari flanked him, her key light slicing like a blade. Sparks flew as light met shadow. The battle raged. They flew. They crashed. They burned. But they stood their ground. And then, the first Gateborn struck Darius in the chest, cracking his armor, knocking him to the ground. Amari screamed, running to him. The creature raised both arms, gathering power, a black storm swirling at his fingertips. "It ends now," he hissed. Darius looked up, barely conscious. His body screamed with pain, but something flickered in his mind, his father's voice. "You're not just my son, you're the last sentinel." He pushed up slowly, meeting Amari's hand. Their key lights flared, and something changed. Not just light, not just power. Unity. Their sparks synchronized. Golden white light burst outward, brighter than any gate ever had. The first Gateborn staggered, roaring in pain. "No, no, you are mine." Darius and Amari stood side by side, and together, they channeled everything they were. Their fear, their hope, their love, their pain, their power, and they pushed. The blast was silent, blinding, final. The gate shattered. The void crumbled. The throne broke apart, vanishing into the stars. And the first Gateborn? Gone. When Darius opened his eyes, he was lying in the courtyard again. The sky above was clear. The city was quiet. Amari sat beside him, breathing heavily. She smiled. We did it. Darius blinked. Did we really? She pointed upward. Where the gate had been, there was now only open sky. Riley ran to them, laughing, half crying. You maniacs. You closed the final gate. Tatiana ran behind her, throwing her arms around them both. I knew you'd come back. The crowd gathered. Soldiers, scientists, survivors. And slowly, they began to cheer. Because it was over. The Gateborn were gone. The war was won. Weeks passed. The world began to heal. Cities rebuilt. Schools reopened. Families returned. And in every country, quiet whispers began to spread, not of monsters, but of heroes. Of kids with glowing lights. Of unity. Of courage. Darius, Amari, and Tatiana stood at the front of the new Sentinel Academy, a place where awakened sparks would be trained to protect, not just the world, but the universe. And at the center of the courtyard stood a statue. Colonel Jonathan Wells, standing tall, hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a younger Darius. His face carved with pride. Amari nudged him. Think he'd be proud? Darius looked at the statue, eyes wet. I know he is. Tatiana skipped up, now taller, stronger, braver. So what now? Darius smiled. We train the next ones. He looked out at the horizon. The world was different now, but it was theirs again. And the light? The light was never going out.